Derek Elia from FutureSwap. I want to talk about the future of futures. Basically, next level derivatives on chain. Good to have you. There he is. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be doing a conversation about the future of futures and how to launch a DeFi product. So let me give you a quick intro of who I am. My name is Derek Elia. I'm the co-founder of FutureSwap along with Benji Richards. We've been in this space for a couple of years now. I've been in the space with DAOs and community and some other DeFi related things, and have been participating in DeFi for quite a while. So I'm very excited to be part of this. We started FutureSwap back in July. So it feels like just a couple weeks ago, but things have just been like taking off. And we've learned a lot, especially kind of, building all this and in the tooling and launching it. And so I'd like to just tell you sort of some things that, some reasons why we decided to do this, and then what we learned and maybe how that can help you if there's any builders watching. So for us, futures are very interesting. We view it as a very large market. Currently, that's being dominated by some very large exchanges, Binance and BitMEX, and we think that over time, the overall this will shift mainly due to network effects from the off-chain world to the on-chain world. And so one of the core components of that is sort of the effects of the order book versus automated market making. And so order books have a long history that's very interesting, but one of the main things that they do is price discovery, and they're really good at that. But traditionally, creating an order book has been pretty tricky, and normally they're computationally expensive. And so if you want to launch a new order book, it requires people to be on there and to use it, and it's sort of like creating a social network where you have to have users to create content to get the users to want to come, and so it requires these network effects that are pretty hard, which is why it's been such like a ferocious industry, and it's very interesting to watch because it's very intense. But with automated market making, you can kind of sidestep a lot of that, right? You basically can allow for liquidity providers to be market makers, and it's much easier to sort of just dump money in a pool, and regardless of who's coming long or short, there's always someone on the other side, right? And so this is like a very interesting concept, and it's actually much easier to implement, right? Especially when compute matters. This is sort of perfect for Ethereum land, right? So another thing that we look at is sort of the decentralized exchange versus centralized exchange issue, where basically these centralized exchanges hold a lot of the funds, hold all the funds that you have, right? And so it's very hard to sort of, if in times of crisis and you want to get your money out, sometimes you just don't have the ability to. You're kind of stuck. And so the idea is, DEXs give you more control over your funds, and with that, sort of, you now can have the freedom to move funds around even in difficult times, and you basically have more transparency of the product that you're working with. Oftentimes these are open source, so you can see the code. People are working around these things. There's a lot of involvement. And if you've heard the term DeFi Lego before, there's also the ability for your product to be sort of a staple in the ecosystem, and for people to create value on top of your product. Now, that's not to say that that's not happening in the centralized world, but I do see sort of more rapid growth in DeFi of that happening, and creating more exotic and more interesting things. So that's a little bit about sort of where we think futures are going, and sort of we took a lot of those ideas and decided, okay, why don't we build a product with those in mind? And so I'm going to share that with you. And if you want to learn more, definitely check out our Medium post. Probably has more detail. But here are some of the key points. So we decided to go with automated market making. One thing that's interesting is being able to spin up a new pair is very easy compared to other systems. And with this, sort of what this lends is that you can now have DeFi native tokens that are, let's call them exotic tokens, that it's very easy to create a new pair based off that, and to sort of look at the performance of that and be able to sort of capture value, go long or short on that pair relatively easily. And so we think that there will be this long tail of very interesting projects that people can speculate on. We find this very interesting, but that doesn't mean we're not focused on sort of the core pairs, sort of that everyone's using. This also allowed us to build an automated market maker because it's less complex than a matching engine for an order book. And what this has is like basically it attracts liquidity providers, the yield-seeking crowd, to sort of come here, because if the pool churns multiple times, you can get a very large, relative to the rest of the products, a relatively large yield. And so it attracts more people to sort of add to the pool, and sort of that's a nice flywheel effect. So once you have automated market making, you can add in another component, which is pulling a price. And we use Chainlink to pull our prices. And with that, we can basically create zero slippage. And what this allows is it enables very large trades to not be affected by price movement, right? And so this is really interesting for large traders and mainly their returns. And so we view this as sort of an advantage, and an interesting advantage that we plan on building and expanding upon. The last thing that I'd like to focus on is governance. I think governance has been such a large topic recently. When we set out to build this, we knew we wanted to have sort of governance baked into the main protocol. We saw what MakerDAO did, and we saw what the effects of the community that occurred because of how they built that. And we wanted to sort of have some similar effects. And so what we've done is almost everything in FutureSwap is part of the governance processing. People can create proposals and change anything to adding new pairs, changing fees, changing the curves for the funding rate, and a lot of other factors. We didn't really get to explore this in our alpha, but we hope in the next launch it's something that we get to explore more so. This also allows users to become more involved in the project as well, and basically, that helps build the community, and the better FutureSwap is, or the rewarded for that. I would like to talk about our launch and what we learned. So we launched about a month ago. It was pretty short. It was about 3 days. We did very little PR. We basically talked to a few friends in DeFi. We wrote a Medium post. Things really were exciting for us during those 3 days. That was a lot of fun. But the main thing is that we proved sort of our core thesis. And that was very important for us because we now get to focus on other elements of what we're experimenting with. And so the first thing I want to talk about that was really useful for us was being able to iterate quickly. This hooks into the governance part, which is because we had parameters that we could change and adjust, we could see what was working and what wasn't working. So we had a few hypotheses. We were able to test that during this alpha to see how users react to different changes, whether those are fees, whether those are curves or whatever. So I would say being able to iterate very quickly is critical early on. And not thinking about how you can do that from a project level, I think is a mistake. So when you're building, make sure to think about, hey, how can we change this once the satellite is launched? You want to be fast. You want to be able to move things quickly. This dog is pretty fast, so I thought that was a good example. So I think this is taboo for a lot of crypto projects, but collect data. Collect data. That doesn't mean you should sell the data. Like, I don't think you should do that. But to know how users are using your system is really important. And so to be able to say, okay, users went down this path, and then this happened. From a design perspective, that's critical. I really don't see how you would design without having the data. It's probably based off maybe some flawed arguments. One thing we learned is once we had some of this data, we could then build an internal dashboard, which gave us sort of this health and view of the system during this alpha launch, which was incredibly important, and we ended up using it a lot, right? But overall, be responsible with the data. Don't do bad things. And so I would say make sure you have a growth plan. In our case, we didn't totally expect to grow as rapidly as we did. We didn't expect to see that much volume. We had very low estimates. We wanted to be conservative, and we made plans around those conservative estimates. So when things went the other way, it really caught us off guard. In 3 days, we went from 0 to $17 million in volume, which for us was a lot. We were expecting in a couple weeks, maybe a couple 100,000. So this was a pleasant surprise. But the problem with that is that we realized we needed to scale much faster than we had anticipated. We thought we had way more time. So I would say make sure you have sort of the best case plan and that scaling plan. And if you hit that, there's not bottlenecks such as like funding your bots or building bots out and not doing things manually, automating some tasks. It's really important. A funny story about our launch is, I think on the second or third day, we had to remove the deposit button after asking people to stop depositing money because we wanted to start winding the project down. And so if you have to remove buttons to stop users, it's probably a good problem. So the team at FutureSwap is part of the DeFi community as a participant, but I've personally never been part of the DeFi community for building a product and then interacting with users on that level. And it was an amazing experience just to work with these individuals, and the amount of feedback we got and the amount of energy and enthusiasm really took us to like another level. And it really made us want to, push to try to get sort of the next launch even better. So if you're lucky enough to launch something, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So now I'm going to jump into how to launch a DeFi project. I feel like there weren't a lot of resources on this, clearly because it's a small space. But I wanted to sort of throw some ideas out there so people who are in this position can have something to look at. It's super important to clearly explain your project. And not only just for you, if you're a lead, make sure you, throughout the team, they understand sort of what the core product is and how you differentiate from others, because people are going to be asking you from all sides, and you have to be able to answer that. And there's so many projects now, it can get kind of fuzzy. So being able to distinguish like how you're different is incredibly important. Be open, listen to your community. You'll get a ton of feedback. You've been working on this project for probably a long time, and the ideas that you've come up with, you're probably sticking to because you've been implementing them for weeks. But once you launch and people are giving you feedback, that's the time to kind of question like, okay, this happened, and they had this issue. Maybe we should reevaluate these things. You will be attacked on a system level. People will start poking at your code to see what's what's potentially available to exploit. And once those are found, you'll have bots within the day that are automatically sort of automating that task to exploit that feature in your, or that bug in your system. So think about backstops. Think about, if there's a 20% chance that this could be attacked, how will we deal with this, right? And so making sure you think about those and you have a plan for that is very important. The other part is to make sure you insulate the team. Things can get very exciting. You'll probably not sleep, and it's going to be very hard to iterate and change things, critical things that you need for your product, if everyone is glued to the screen on how quickly you're doubling or you're tripling, and what all the crazy attacks that are going on and what people are saying. So I would say make sure there's a plan to say, hey, one person will look at this. If there's any code red, they'll be able to communicate that. Otherwise, the team is focused on getting those iterations in. Make sure you have that. And then a lot of people have been asking me how to build community. The best way to build community is by shipping something, shipping anything. It could be a splash page, it could be an article, it could be anything. Just create a medium where they can interact with each other and just start feeding into that. And then, once you have your community sort of built up, the more product you deploy, the more will come, and you'll be able to get that feedback. And as you get that feedback, you'll find a group that really helps you. A few members that are really involved in being able to ask them questions and what they think of things. It's incredibly valuable. So, yeah. It looks like that's about it. It's almost 8, and yeah, thanks so much for having me. And this has been a lot of fun. Let me know if you have any questions.